You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of truth. A dimension of freedom. A dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
I don't know, whoever did that vocal intro should be paid lots of money for it, because that guy has an amazing voice. Welcome to the Capitalist Corner. I am your host, Mark Pellegrino, and also the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my co-host and vice chair of the American Capitalist Party, Michael Liebowitz, who, along with Persephone, the great Persephone, is deadlifting this show for the last 2 months, and the entire channel, I might add, as I reside on the dark continent, otherwise known as Europe, folks. Michael, what is going on with the Rational Alternative? Tell me, baby.
Well, Rational Alternative is kicking ass and taking names. In addition to having this show, we also have Everyday Ethics at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time every weekday on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, although I'm informed by Persephone she might be screwing me, that we do Crime, Corrections, and Culture at 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time. She may be out tomorrow. She's got problems, I guess. But either way, things are going great. We're knocking it out of the park. We do the weekend show. We got Megan Ribbons this weekend. We've been discussing education. We've got more shows coming down the pike. Hopefully, Mark will be getting more involved once he's done with his vacation. And, so all's good.
It's a working vacation, man. And guess what? It is 89 degrees here in Paris right now. It's about 87% humidity and no fucking air conditioners, my friend. We live in the third world over here in Europe, I got to tell you.
All right. It's 82. It's 82 here right now, and it's gonna be 87. The air conditioner's not on. Come on. I don't think you're going to get much.
This building is 500 years old, thick stone. It doesn't it's like
I don't know why you chose that building. Who chose that?
It's nice.
Anyway, all right.
Who chose it? I want to know. Was it you, Mark? Did you choose the place?
No, she got it.
So basically you're blaming your wife.
No, this is just the way Paris is, man. I got to tell you, the buildings here are all old. They look great from the outside. Anyway, Michael, we have a lot to talk about today. Because
Indeed.
Because it seems like Trump, if you didn't know this already, has usurped the Republican Party and is well, not so slowly but surely taking over it. And the MAGA wing has more or less become the Republican.
No, yeah, he's taken over. I mean, this is kind of what I meant when I was talking to Jim yesterday. It's one of the elements that differentiates Trump from every other politician. I had to go for quite a drive this morning, and whenever I do, I put on conservative talk radio, just to hear what they're yapping about. And was listening to Brian Kilmeade, and Rich Lowry was on, and they talked about it. And I think it was Rich Lowry said there's never been a president with this type of hold and this type of influence over a party. He dominates the Republican Party. They do what he says. I mean, you saw, I wish I would have sent the picture to Persephone. Maybe Persephone would be nice enough to find it and post it. The picture of John Cornyn reading Trump's book.
I would love to see that, because I only read about it.
Yes, Persephone, please find it. Cornyn, Cornyn. We got a €2 super sticker from Regina. We do get super chats and super stickers. Thank you very much.
Also, I think we forgot to talk about what we're streaming on right now.
You forgot everything. You're missing up. We're on Twitch. We're on YouTube.
Spotify.
No, we're not streaming on Spotify, Mark.
Well, whatever, but we are there, right? We can be found on Spotify.
Okay, so John Cornyn, let me just, before I put the picture, John Cornyn, I guess back in 2023, said that Trump's time is over. Trump is done, and Trump didn't take kindly to that. In 2016, he opposed the border wall, and Trump didn't take too kindly to that. So I guess ever since, he's been doing whatever he can to kiss the orange ass of our hefty leader. And so For instance, he's changed his view on the filibuster, that sort of thing. And he was in this primary. And this is what he did. He posted this. I mean, dude, just put your nuts in a jar, mail them to Trump, and be done with it. I mean, just be done with it. Like, when you're willing to debase yourself to this point, you are pathetic. And when I saw that, I was thinking this morning, we talk about not, a lack of principle in politicians, right? But there's also an overwhelming amount of cowardice. They're just such spineless cowards, right? And as I Like Numbers points out, he still got smoked because Trump endorsed the other guy. So you sold your dignity. You just completely made an asshole out of yourself. And for what? For what, dude? You still lost. And now all you have is no nuts and a stupid book. Congratulations.
Yeah, Mike, it would have been bad enough had he won the election and
Right.
had to live in that seat as a sycophant of Trump. But now, you're right. He lost his dignity. He gave up principles and lost the office as well. So now he's going home. He's going home with his tail between his legs, and as you said, nutless. And
So,
that's no way to live.
Ian Gilmore says, don't give Trump power he doesn't have. Trump is 9 for 9, Ian, on his endorsements, on the people he's primaried. There's a list of people going back, quite some time of Trump having people primaried that he doesn't like, and he normally wins. Lately, he's 9 for 9. In this specific case, the argument is it would have been a close race had Trump not endorsed Paxton. But he doesn't win like he won without Trump's endorsement. I haven't heard it. I haven't seen it anywhere.
Yeah, and so
Let's see.
Ken Paxton seems to be an interesting character because he was the attorney general over there in Texas, but there's a cloud of corruption that sort of follows this guy, Michael. He was, I guess he was brought up for impeachment by the House we'll talk about that a little bit. Exactly what he was brought up for impeachment charges. Of course, he was not convicted, but there are some other outlying charges that are sitting around waiting to lower.
Oh, we got it. Thank you, Greg. We also got $1.99 from Katie Ellis. I'm trying to find something right now, Mark. Can you just read? You got it in front of you?
Yeah. Let me see what we got here.
I want to verify what Ian Gilmore just said. I want to see if it's accurate.
What did Ian Gilmore just say?
I'll tell you once I find it. Just stay focused.
Yeah. Hold on, because I have to scare up this stuff right now. I didn't expect to scare it up. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now.
No, I didn't want you to find the numbers. What you're looking for is why was he impeached? He was impeached by a Republican. The Republicans
basically, from what I remember, he was impeached for appearing to use the office to benefit a crony friend of his, is from what I remember, who is a real estate guy, and I think he was using his office to benefit this guy. And apparently, some whistleblowers came out with respect to this, and. But I want to find the details of it.
So this guy, let's just go over. So, okay, Ken Paxton, there were criminal charges against him, allegations of infidelity. He's remained a force in state politics. He was his opponent calls him the most corrupt politician in America. He had securities fraud charges. He was indicted on felony security fraud charges in Texas and was accused of misleading investors in a company years earlier. He would have faced decades in prison if convicted. He ultimately made an agreement where he did community service and some such thing as that.
So the impeachment process began after Paxton requested $3.3 million in taxpayer money to settle a lawsuit with a former top staffer who'd been fired after reporting that the attorney general had his conduct to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So the whistleblower accused Paxton of using his authority to benefit his political friend Nate Paul, who is, I guess, a very generous donator to him, a real estate investor, and
There were 16 articles of impeachment, but then when it went before the Senate to convict him, I guess Trump called on them, told them don't convict this guy, so they ultimately let him off the hook. I don't know if they did it because of Trump. I just know that Trump did it.
Right. So apparently he used the employees of the Attorney General's office to write a legal opinion, which was intended to help Paul avoid foreclosure on sales of properties on businesses that he owned, and protracted delays in the securities fraud investigation. 16 counts, apparently, that he was acquitted of in the Senate, Michael. Anyway, and I think the securities fraud is still pending out there. I think that is still pending on this guy. So I think Trump has found a like-minded spirit, man. Essentially a criminal who bilks the system and abuses the system, also abuses his own relationships. Apparently, he's found a fairly solid ally in this guy. This is what criminals like to do, right? They like to hang together. Isn't this what birds of a feather flock together mean, Michael?
So I do want to say yes to that, but yes, Ian was correct. I want to just say that Paxton was ahead in the polls prior to Trump's endorsement. So Paxton tried to, not Paxton, Cornyn, although it doesn't seem that Trump's endorsement maybe didn't actually sway the election. Cornyn still debased himself, regardless. That ultimately is the point. And Trump does have a lot of power in the Republican Party, regardless of whether this particular endorsement won it. Also, it's important to note that that Cornyn, even prior to the endorsement, had swayed from MAGA in the past, and Paxton is presenting himself as sort of the pro-MAGA guy. So whether it's the endorsement or not, I can't say that no, the MAGA factor played no part. I don't think that would be accurate.
Yeah, he did give such a late endorsement, though. You get the sense that if it swayed people, it were people on the margins, not necessarily the vote. Apparently they're in this guy's camp for a long time. But Michael, when you're wishy-washy like that, when you present a front that's not principled, when it's very clear that what you're trying to do is suck up to the powers that be, that doesn't present a very powerful front to anybody. And I think I would run from that as well, to be honest with you. You want somebody who's morally consistent. And at least what a guy like Paxton brings is moral consistency within that framework of the MAGA movement.
What do you mean? The guy has cheated on his wives.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about objective moral principles. You know how a thing can have a moral consistency within.
But they have no morals.
No. I know. But I'm trying to say, within certain frameworks, a thing can make sense within that framework. It doesn't necessarily mean it's consistent in the way we mean it. It just means this guy's a 100% MAGA supporter, and that's exactly what Trump is looking for. And what MAGA are looking for is loyalty as a quote-unquote virtue.
I do want to say, Ian Gilmore says Chip Roy lost also. Yes, Trump didn't endorse anybody in the race for Texas Attorney General. But the Mays Middleton labeled himself MAGA Mays, cast himself as the MAGA candidate, and pummeled Roy for saying Trump engaged in clearly impeachable conduct on January 6th. So, and then Roy tried to defend his relationship with Trump. So again, the race turned on Trump regardless of Trump's specific endorsement, Ian. So I don't know how you can say that the party is not Trump's or that we're overstating Trump's influence when the candidates in each of those races are trying to cater to Trump. Scary, man.
It's super scary. But this is the boat we're in.
Well, yeah. This guy, Paxton, I am old enough. I hate this saying. I'm not going to say that. I remember when the Republicans used to say that Clinton, if a guy can't be trusted to keep his vows to his wife, how can he be trusted to keep his oath of office? And
who originally said that? Who originally said that, by the way?
I don't know who originally said it.
I want to say it was Harry Truman, but I could be wrong.
Oh, okay. So okay, well, I don't know where that comes from, but either way, the bottom line is the Republicans are now the party of no principles. That's the point.
Yeah, and way back when, Michael, I would say in the '90s, when they were forced to, gather, circle the wagons around some form of constitutional principles, they actually represented something. They still were conservators of classical liberalism and constitutional government. That is long since gone, man. Trump has completely annihilated that.
That, my friend, is done. Also, God, I can't remember Persephone. Find out the Democrat woman who was running for office, who's made her anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic remarks. I want to know the exact name before I say what I want to say. I can't remember what it was. So. Also, just, it's not in the title here, but how about, Galindo. That's her name, yes. The other day, so I just want to put this out there, when Adam Mossoff said that when Massey lost, well, at least the Republicans, they get rid of their anti-Semites, but the Democrats have this Melissa Galindo. Well, Melissa Galindo actually lost in the primary, just like Massey did. Massey's loss, I don't believe, had anything to do with anti-Semitism, because that's not what they were running against him on. I don't know if Galindo lost because of anti-Semitism, but I know she lost. So do we now say, well, we can support the Democrats because they're at least throwing the anti-Semites out? There's also a guy that lost. Maybe Ian can remember his name. I can't keep up with all this stuff. There's a guy who lost in a primary too that they got rid of. Maureen Galindo is the woman's name. Ian says, yes, Mossoff's point was bad at the time. It hasn't aged well. No, it has not.
All right. Well, Michael, the Jewish lobby, they're all over this. So I have no doubt in my mind that she was ousted by the Jewish lobby.
Persephone, can you find out for me the guy's name that I'm talking about that just lost a Democrat who lost in a primary? They say he's really bad. I think he's made some anti-Semitic comments himself. So, yeah, Mark. So, Republicans are the party of MAGA, right? The Democrats, well, they're awful. I don't know if you've seen what's going on with the Libertarian Party.
No, do tell.
Oh, for FFS. Do you know Jeremy Kaufman, who he is?
Yeah.
Okay, super asshole. So I actually debated him once on Larry Sharp's show, and Kaufman, oh God, he was just awful. Contradiction after contradiction. But anyways, I think it is Al Green, Katie, but I'm not positive. Persephone, check on Al Green for me, who he is and if he just lost. The Kaufmanites, the LPNH, who have put out memes about they wish that their girlfriends would look at them like Jewish hostages looked at Hamas, shit like that. Always putting just repugnant, repulsive shit out there. And evidently they endorsed Trump, which is a no-no. You can't endorse other candidates. So they got unaffiliated. The National Party unaffiliated them. Which is, stirring up a whole thing. Dave Smith, of course, is siding with the LPNH people. At the convention, some woman stole the LPNH people's magazines or took them and threw them away. And then somebody from the LPNH, a dude, slapped her in the face. And now they're all over the internet fighting with one another, going back and forth with each other. I'm not positive he made anti-Semitic comments, Persephone. I think he did, and I want you to find out for me. There's a whole lot of problems with the Libertarian Party right now.
Seems like there's always a lot of
there
problems.
is, but Dave Smith seems to be jumping ship from them, which I would just say, who cares? But you also have Austin Peterson out there saying we're going to have a libertarian nationalism. So they're an absolute disaster as well. There's really not many places a person can turn, but
there is a party, Michael. There is definitely a party. And I was talking to a disaffected libertarian, as a matter of fact, who lives in Ohio. And I'm trying to convince him to start a chapter there in Ohio. That would be a great state for us to stake our flag in. And it's called the American Capitalist Party, guys. And if you go to AmericanCapitalistParty.org, read the policies, and you'll find something there that maybe at first glance seems to you like it's libertarian-esque, but I think if you dig deeper, you'll see that it's different. It's very different. We're fundamentally different. We're founded on principles that the Libertarian Party are not founded on. We also believe in strong foreign policy. Michael, you articulated, I think, the ideas really well to a person who asked you what the differences were between the Libertarian Party and the Capitalist Party. Can you read that note once out loud to everybody here?
I don't need to read it. I can just say it. Just give me 1 second. So I think that fundamentally we differ from them in terms of principles, and what our principles are derived from egoism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand. Now, I just want to say that doesn't mean everybody who joins the party has to be an objectivist or has to be, adhere to the philosophy of Ayn Rand. But our leadership, our principles, that's their derivation. So that's fundamentally. Now, on the concrete level, we don't traffic with anarchists. You're not going to find anarchists running for office in our party, nor gaining cover in our party at all. We're also pro-intellectual property, whereas many libertarians are not. The party doesn't, I believe, take an actual stance on it, the Libertarian Party. But there's a lot of them that are very anti-intellectual property folks. And also on foreign policy. We are constitutionalists. We're not interventionists. We don't want to be the police of the world, but we're also not pacifists, which the Libertarian Party, I think a strong argument can be made that they are.
Indeed. Indeed, Michael. So we have an interesting topic here that, unless you feel like we haven't exhausted everything there is for us to talk about with respect to Paxton and Trump's exceedingly horrible grasp over the now, I think, dead Republican Party, Michael. Do you think it's revivable? I don't think it's revivable. Hold on 1 second.
Okay, so I want to go back to Al Green because we were just talking about him, and then we'll get to what you said. So Al Green was the Democrat who lost in Congress. He was a longtime representative. He's a longtime rep, and he lost to a freshman. I guess it seems that they had a runoff in a district out there. Green voted against declaring from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, to be anti-Semitic. So he wouldn't declare that to be anti-Semitic. He's one of just 4 House members who voted to require universities to disclose investments in countries whose leaders face ICC arrest warrants, indirectly targeting Israel. In 2024, he introduced a resolution affirming Palestinian statehood, to which 2 Jewish members were added as co-sponsors. Now, the point is, I'm not calling this guy an anti-Semite. What I'm saying is, what I just read about him is much in line with the stuff that Massey was saying publicly. So if they're going to call Massey an anti-Semite, they should call him an anti-Semite. I'm not calling either of them anti-Semites. I'm only saying that the Democrats voted this guy out. So that's 2. Whereas Mossoff the other day made the claim that the Democrats are basically the party of anti-Semitism. They're allowing them in their ranks, allowing them to hold office, whereas the Republicans aren't. Well, not really true.
I thank you, Michael, for showing us there's not really any difference between the Republicans and the Democrats when push comes to shove. So we're coming up on our anniversary as a country, man.
Well, you were just talking about the Republicans. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just found the information and I wanted to get it out there.
I was, but now I forgot what I said. Do you remember?
You were talking about the Republican Party falling apart, and
it is. Oh, do you think it can be resuscitated? I mean, I think there's.
I do not. I don't think so. In fact, I mean, it's funny because as I'm listening to, I listened to a clip from Dave Smith this morning, and he talked about how the libertarians don't realize the revolution that's happening right in front of them right now with all the changes. What's happening is nihilism. Mm-hmm. Right? There's not a pro-liberty contingent. What he's talking about, people are rejecting the elites, the establishment, the institutions. That's fine. I'm not saying we need to support them, but you need to have a positive vision for what replaces it. You don't just walk the streets of France with your fucking pitchforks, looking to put heads on them. heads on pikes. You have to actually have a vision of what you're going to do. And it just seems like the battles now, it's no longer between, conservative Republicans and liberal Democrats. It's between the woke left and the nihilist right. I don't know how else to frame it. But, I mean, you have the extremes of Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and those loons. But Trump is, full of lies. People believe it. So I don't think the Republican Party can be rescued. I don't think the Democratic Party can be rescued. And I don't think the Libertarian Party can be rescued. Megan Ribbons wants to know what's involved in starting an American Capitalist Party chapter. And she says, what if she has less than 100% interest in politics? If you have 100% interest in politics, maybe see a doctor. I don't think that anyone should be devoting themselves to that degree to politics, Megan. But Mark will be in touch with you on how to establish a chapter, won't you, Mark?
Sure. I mean, we have the stuff set up to start 527s at the state level, pretty much anywhere. And we have the people who have the know-how to do it, namely Ariana Sneath, who is amazing at that stuff. She really knows the ins and outs of election law and how to set up the party with respect to, the federal and state taxes that you're going to have to be responsible for as a party. It's a whole thing. So you may not have, you may have less than 100% commitment to politics, but you certainly have to be committed to the process because it's a lot of work. Luckily for us, it's been trafficked out to people who really know what they're doing with respect to that. Michael and I just, we read books on capitalism and free market and philosophy, and we talk about these things. But the real nuts and bolts behind forming the party is behind the scenes with these folks who really know what they're doing. And we can get you in touch, Megan, with Ariana. She knows her stuff.
Yes. Robert Naser, thank you for the $5. He says the problem with saving the Republican Party is what would they go back to? What is the goal, the core, the ideal? That's very true.
Michael, when William F. Buckley articulated, I think, the conservative vision, it was something like standing astride history and saying stop. Well, to me, that's not really a vision at all. I think we've articulated a better vision of American conservatism than anyone else by saying that you're conserving the tradition of classical liberalism, which I don't remember any conservative or popular pundit really talking about that. The conservation of classical liberalism, which is the American tradition, which would mean a strong constitutional government, a representative republic with strong individual rights protections and property protections. Period. That's what it would mean. But they went from their origins, Michael. I don't know that they ever had that in their origins. So anyway, speaking of this, what the founders intended, we're coming up on 250 years being a republic. We've swayed far from the republic, of course. I think now we live in a spoils system democracy, and we're feeling the effects of it. $37 trillion of debt. 51% of the population dependent in some way on a check coming from the government. That is not a representative republic, Michael. That is not a free country in the way that we mean it. So we should talk a little bit about what the founders had in mind.
So what actually got me thinking about this was John Stossel's article in Reason magazine referencing Ben Franklin's famous "A Republic, if you can keep it." When asked what kind of government he gave us. So I wanted to make sure that we could get the founders' view of what a republic was. And the founders' view of a republic was, basically that you can't have pure democracy because then you have mob rule. So what you needed to do was have people voted into office, representatives, people that would represent the people and ultimately deriving their power from the people, and they would go and vote, and that it would be all limited by the Constitution. And we've got some great quotes. Maybe, Persephone, you can put these up. You asked me earlier if there was anything, and I said no, but I jumped the gun on that, I think. But I will start. Reading these quotes because I'm a wicked great guy. So this is from Alexander Hamilton in a speech to Congress. He says, it has been observed by an honorable gentleman that a pure democracy, if it were practicable, would be the most perfect government. Experience has proved that no position in politics is more false than this. The ancient democracies, in which the people themselves deliberated, never possessed one feature of good government. Their very character was tyranny, their figure deformity. I thought that was good.
Oh yeah.
I was looking for some feedback on it.
No, Alexander Hamilton could come up with some good shit. Apparently, he could speak extemporaneously like that, and he was a gifted orator, and he's nailed it on the head there. Although, Michael, I want to read Thomas Jefferson's quote at the very end of this. You can read Hamilton.
What are you trying to give me, Hamilton?
Yeah, I am giving you Hamilton. But hey, Michael, yeah.
I'm going to read George Washington instead.
Okay, but wait a minute. What have we been hearing for the past 3 or 4 decades from every political pundit out there, from every politician? They keep saying we are a democracy.
Not only that, but they say we need to save our democracy.
Save our democracy.
I hate the goddamn. I hate the saying.
As do I, but it's convenient, and most people equate democracy, Michael, with actual, protections of individual rights, which is not what a democracy is.
No, it's not. And I think Persephone runs around saying that. To be honest, we're going to save democracy, all that kind of stuff. That's a big That's a big slogan of Persephone's. Yeah, Persephone is giving me the thumbs up right now in the.
That's a Persephone slogan. We got to save our democracy. We're certainly here on the left with respect to Trump. We got to root Trump, the dictator, out to save democracy. So our choices, Michael, are between the whimsical dictator on the one hand or the whims of the mob on the other. Can I say none of the above in that?
You can. Can I read this though?
Yeah, but you're going to read Alexander Hamilton again. I thought you wanted to go to George Washington.
I'm going to do both. I'm going to read Washington first. Washington says, "It always has been and will continue to be my earnest desire to learn and to comply as far as consistent with the public sentiment. But it is on great occasions only and after time has been given for cool and deliberate reflection that the real voice of the people can be known." In other words, we don't just do what people want immediately. This is another that was George Washington. This is Alexander Hamilton. Great confusion about the words democracy, aristocracy, monarchy. Democracy, in my sense, where the whole power of the government in the people, whether exercised by themselves or by representatives, chosen by them either mediately or immediately and legally accountable to them. Consequences, the proposed government or representative democracy, constitution revocable and alterable by the people. This representative democracy, as far as consistent with the genius, has all the features of good government. So there he's talking about democracy, but representative democracy, which ultimately is a republic. Let me see over here. George Washington, the preservation of the sacred fire of liberty and the destiny of the Republican model of government are justly considered, perhaps as deeply as finally staked on the experiment entrusted to the hands of the American people. Thomas Jefferson.
This is mine. This is mine. I want to read this one because I like this one. A wise and frugal government which shall restrain men from injuring one another shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. This is the sum of good government, and we could put that right on the letterhead of the American Capitalist Party, Michael, because that is precisely the kind of government, the size of government that we think should exist. Keep men from hurting each other, and that's it.
Persephone, I just want to thank you so much for putting those up there, Persephone. And Persephone is not a touter of that slogan.
No, Mike, come on. We believe everything that you say.
Well, you should. The founders' view of private property, they were very good. I mean, they weren't perfect, but they were very good when it came to to private property. They believed that people had a right to property, and that right to property predates government. That you have a right to property, and government is there to protect it, not to expropriate it. Now, they did allow for taxation, and they did allow for eminent domain through the Takings Clause of the Fifth Amendment, but by and large, they were good on property. So The question that I had asked ChatGPT, what was the founders' views on property as embedded in the Constitution? And the answer I got was property is a natural or pre-political right. Secure property is essential to liberty. Government exists in large part to protect property. Property rights require legal and constitutional safeguards. And then it talks about property rights are not unlimited and may be regulated under law for public purposes. But Madison was the best on it. He argued that protection of differing faculties and unequal acquisition of property inevitably creates economic differences. And he said, the protection of these faculties is the first object of government. Big property rights, guys. I think Ayn Rand was better, but she, of course, had a lot of history to draw on that they did not have to draw on.
And I think she should be celebrated, as should Frederick Douglass, as a second generation or third generation of founding fathers who were able to push the moral purity of our country even further, Michael. Frederick Douglass really held his generation to the constitutional fire, as he should have. He wanted America to be consistent with respect to its principles, and he was a brave in his day and age in putting those principles out there and articulating how far America had fallen from those principles. And Rand, I think, was better than anybody in the 20th century and even into our century at articulating the moral reasons behind not only our economic system, but our political system. What moral foundations is a representative republic based on? But the concept of the individual as a basic unit of society, as a source of value, and as possessing rights, liberties, freedoms to promote rational action, Michael. That's what this is all for, to promote and preserve rational action.
Yes. And ultimately what we want, we talked about it earlier, there's really no party out there. There's not even really a movement that wants to restore us to our founding principles. And I'm not even sure that is the best way to put it. I think it's a great start to move toward the founding principles and constitutional government. But ultimately, I do think there's aspects in the Constitution that should be amended if we are ever going to achieve free market capitalism. So I tried an interesting experiment, by the way, Mark. Mm-hmm. And what I did was I asked Claude, the question that I asked Claude was, when and where in world history most resembled Ayn Rand's view of capitalism? And it said nowhere has fully embodied it, but it said the closest approximation, the closest was the United States, roughly 1870 through 1914. There was minimal federal regulation, hard money, explosive productive achievement, limited welfare state, mostly private charity, no federal entitlements, relatively free immigration and trade. But there were land grants to railroads, tariff protection, Jim Crow stuff. It also gives honorable mentions to Britain between 1820 and 1870 and Hong Kong 1960 through 1997. So what I then did was I took those years in places and I submitted them to Gemini. And I asked, what was economic growth and poverty reduction like in these periods when juxtaposed with other periods? This was, I found, very interesting. Here's the answer. These three historical periods represent remarkable economic transformations. The United States, 1870 through 1914, experienced massive industrial scaling. Great Britain cemented its status as the world's first industrial superpower, and that was 1820 to 1870. Hong Kong, between 1960 and 1977, achieved one of the fastest transitions from developing to high-income status in modern history. The United States, 1870 to 1914, the material standard of living doubled in roughly 2 generations, driven by an industrial boom, railroad expansion, mass immigration, etc. Absolute poverty among wage earners dropped dramatically from roughly 62% in 1870 to 39% in 1900. And there was a period after that where poverty rose again. It doesn't say how much, and that's where they started getting into the debates about why. Great Britain from 1820 to 1870, solid economic growth, life expectancy and calorie intake improved. That's where people, you have a lot of complaints about the growing pains and whatnot that took place in England. Hong Kong, to me, is just a phenomenal example.
It was.
Yeah, their GDP from 1960 to 1997 grew by roughly 180 times. Living standards experienced explosive increase, and poverty reduction was slashed as the labor-intensive manufacture absorbed.
But Michael, theirs was a far more primitive economy, and it was in the mid 20th century when we were a very advanced industrial society, so they could actually make those changes from poverty, transition from poverty to wealth much, much faster, which should be the case for many third world countries today if they would let in free markets. Yeah.
And so that was kind of my point, is I didn't want to bias, because I could go buy, an Ayn Rand book or, Alan Greenspan's book on the history of capitalism. And there's a lot of them. But then people will say, well, it's biased. So I just wanted to take the dates, submit them to Gemini, and see what the answer was. Now, in my view, and this is where, the arguments would come in, a lot of where they talk about the growing pains in Britain, life has growing pains. Life does, in general. Any progress is going to entail some type of growing pains. And even if you don't have progress, you're going to have massive pains. It's not as if they had this utopia, capitalism comes along and you get growing pains, right? But that is sort of the image that's presented.
Well, yeah, Michael, well, unfortunately, getting out of poverty ain't pretty, especially when all you have for capital is human beings. So you're relatively poor. So the conditions under which you're going to be working aren't pretty. And they certainly aren't pretty to first worlders like us who have become accustomed to, working conditions that simply aren't normal in the rest of the world because they simply aren't rich enough. But we went through a stage like that. And of course, socialists love to point to those times as being times of extreme inequality of wealth, and the working conditions were awful, and they actually needed to pool together and assert themselves politically in order to make changes economically. Of course, that's not exactly the way it happened. They asserted themselves politically after these changes were happening economically. It was innovation. It was the market. It was growing wealth. It was actually making child labor something from ubiquitous to non-existent in America. It wasn't laws. It wasn't child labor laws that did that in America. And it wasn't unions that were busting for bigger wages and shorter working hours. This was happening already. The guys like Henry Ford already went well above the minimum wage. He already set working hours much lower because his workforce was simply that much more productive. So they didn't have to work that hard. So, people look back at the ugliness, Michael, at the picture of the times of the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it's difficult for them to grasp that those people were actually choosing alternatives too. Many of them were coming from a worse place to a better place. Now, it might not be better according to our alternatives, but it was certainly better according to theirs. Right. And not only was it better according to theirs, theoretically, it was in reality better than theirs, because they were able 2 generations later to send their children to college, and their children became doctors and lawyers and politicians. Even though they might not have been able to gather the resources for that, their children and their children's children became far more prosperous than they ever would have been in their home country. And that was because we were relatively free.
Yes, sir. Persephone, I want you to book 3 special content episodes for subscribers. I want to do 1 on individual rights, 1 on capitalism, and then 1 on the idiotic idea of late stage capitalism. So I know you've been telling me to do it. That's why I said it. You're yelling. I give you what you want, and you still yell. This is not nice. But yeah, I want to book those 3. I think I'll be able to get Jim to do it. Maybe Mark will join us. So yeah, I think those are 3 good long form episodes for special content for subscribers. because ultimately the justification for capitalism doesn't lie in the mass results it gives. The reason that I have not read that, Ian Gilmore. Sounds like a good book. The reason that capitalism does what it does is because it protects individual rights, because it frees up individuals to explore, to innovate, to produce, to grow. And that is what we need to defend. Mark has absolutely gone off the hook here because he's gone away, but he has not turned off the volume. I know you're there, but what are you doing?
I had to plug in my computer because it's dying.
Why isn't it plugged in already?
Because I didn't have time. I didn't know that it was so low when I stepped in.
We go through this all the time with the computer. What do you mean you didn't have time and you
Don't
didn't
worry about
anticipate? Okay. What we're just talking about individual rights, and that is the core. That is what we ultimately need to advocate. That's what I think people need to learn to advocate, is the principle that the government's purpose is to protect individual rights. To do that, we need to understand individual rights.
Amen. Amen. Well, so Michael, there was an article in the Daily Economy that I found very interesting. And it was, well, you gave this article to me. I found it very interesting. The boomer versus millennials debate misses the bigger economic point. Did you just talk about that?
I did not, no.
Oh, well, why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because you said I found this article, and then
you
said,
that's why
well, you gave me. Where did you find it? In your text messages?
Yes,
where I sent it?
You sent it to me. But I find it interesting because I get involved in this debate all the time. People think I'm a boomer, even though I'm not a boomer. I'm a Gen Xer. But we do get in this debate with the younger generation where we're like, you guys are a bunch of pussies. You have it easy. But they're always like, we have it really hard. We have this horrible debt. We've got student debt. We can't work. Yada yada. They have their trail of tears. We have ours. Well, we grew up during the misery index and hype and inflation and But
if you run around in a competition to find out who had the worst life, there's a good chance anyone engaging in the discussion is a pussy. So you don't have to say they're pussies or they can call you pussies. If you're like, oh my God, I had it so hard, you're a pussy? No. Here's the thing. Life tends to get better on a grand scale, always. Yeah. Every generation thinks that it's the toughest and the previous one are soft, they suck. I'll never forget as long as I live, because my whole life I'd heard about the greatest generation that fought World War II, came out of the Depression. Then I read Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique. In it, she talks about how soft the World War II generation was. She's like, these guys are wusses. That's why they can't win the war. Or that's why it was so, all types of shit like that. People always do this. You can find quotes from 500 BC where people are saying, oh, everything sucks nowadays. The kids don't listen to their parents. Everything's going to hell. Everybody does that. Everybody thinks they got it so tough. Yeah, what did the boomers have it so hard? Oh, we had automobiles and they were stick shift. Yeah? Try having just a horse and carriage and you don't know how to change a shoe. Or what about before they learned how to do that?
Hey, Michael, you hear a lot about how there's no middle class anymore. The middle class is being hollowed out. Some of these stats startled me, so I just want to throw them out there because I found them interesting, because I hear this bullshit all the time too. And this is what politicians love to play on. They love people feeling insecure, like things are slipping through their fingers like sand, like they have no life in front of them. They need the political class to save them from inevitable doom. But Michael, if you measure the middle class by purchasing power rather than relative standing, it hasn't hollowed out. The upper middle class expanded from 10% of American families in 1979 to 31%. Now, I was underneath I was in the lower middle class, so I wasn't in that top 10% tier, right? So I grew up the way a lot of folks did, the way the majority of folks did. In that,
I thought you were going to say you grew into that
No,
that bracket.
but by 1979, Michael, 31% by 2024, a full third of the country is considered upper middle class. Not just to mention, pretty much any middle class American is in the top 10% or maybe even top 5% of wealth, globally speaking, when you compare it to other countries. That's why it kills me, Michael, when you get these people talking about the richest 1% and let's eat the rich. Well, you're considered rich by the standard.
Yes, when you compare you to somebody else.
Most of the world. So maybe we should take your shit too, until everybody else has that, 2-car garage.
Ian Gilmore says something interesting. He says he doesn't think things always improve, though. No, I'm saying generally they get better. I'm talking in terms of living standards. But he says politics has definitely gotten worse. I don't know. I mean, Preston Brooks goes on the Senate floor and beats Charles Sumner with a cane.
Yes, beats him nearly to death, by the way. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's gotten worse in my lifetime from, what it was 20 years ago or so, or, 30 years ago. But there's been time, and we had a civil war. I mean, it's been pretty bad. I mean, when you look back at Jefferson having, paying or having his buddies in the press, malign Adams and make shit up about him. I mean,
for sure, it was bad. It's always been bad. I think what we have, Michael, is more exposure to it. I think it's part of our everyday lives in a way that it might not have been to people back then. The share of families too poor to reach middle class living standards fell from 54%. This is during that same time, from 79 to 24. To 35% over this same period. This is crazy, Michael. This is a story of abundance that is simply not being told, and it needs to be fucking told, because this is despite the political class ripping us off on a daily basis and taking half of our wealth. This is despite that. It just blows my mind. Listen to this, Michael. The Economist reached a similar verdict about Gen Z, concluding that they are unprecedentedly rich. Okay, the typical 25-year-old Gen Z earns annual household income of don't make fun of me.
I'm laughing.
I sounded a little foreign there.
This is what I'm laughing at. It's Persephone.
Gen Z. I got it right that time. The typical 25-year-old Gen Zer earns an annual household income of over $40,000, which is more than 50% above what boomers earned at the same age after adjusting for taxes, transfers, and inflation. That is incredibly wealthy. When I was in my early 20s, Michael, I mean, $40,000 a year was fucking incredible.
Was that when you were in No Holds Barred?
Unfortunately, yes. That movie is out there to haunt me forever and ever and ever. Once it's on celluloid, Michael, you can't take it back.
Oh, speaking of movies, we got a lot of answers to your question from yesterday. I got to go find them.
Which inspired me, actually, Michael, to go on AI and ask it what it could find based on all its media, what the consensus was generally on the most scary movie of all time. So I have an answer too, even though it's not my answer.
All right. So Jenna Kleem says Deliverance. That's actually based on Mark's life experiences. Okay. Jeanette says Day After Tomorrow.
No, Day After Tomorrow? Come on.
Teresa says The Shining. Ian Gilmore says the original Halloween. Nicole Hingle says the original Exorcist. And Randy says his kids would say Saw, but the one that stands out to him is Night of the Living Dead.
So, Michael, do you want to know what the critics from Rotten Tomatoes generally think is the greatest horror movie of all time? And I want to throw this out there. What?
Yeah, hold on. I just want to see if I can guess. I want to guess it. The scariest movie of all time, Psycho. You're on mute now.
Yes, because my dog is crying because Tracy just left to get some food.
Oh, Well, but what was the scariest movie, Mark? You still got to tell us.
Okay, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, wow. I would not agree with that at all.
No, I don't think that movie ages well, and they admit that it doesn't age well. Hold on, let me get my dog here. Hold on.
Oh, Mark said greatest horror. Yeah, you're right. Mark, you said greatest horror. I think in here it says
I did say greatest, but it also said scariest by consensus, by critical consensus. So that's supposed to be the scariest movie of all time.
Mark it has to do the capitalist thought of the day. If he thinks he's getting out of it because he has doggy trouble, he's sadly mistaken. I will say that. But Ian Gilmore's right. Greatest and scariest are not the same, but I would have to guess that they would dovetail together. I don't know how you could have a great horror movie that's not incredibly scary. Can you do the capitalist thought of the day?
Yeah, look, guys, we live in a spoil system democracy. We want to get back to a constitutionally regulated representative republic, and that's what the American Capitalist Party would get us back to, so that we can be free, so that the government would only do a couple things. We protect property and our rights. That's it. The rest would be up to us. So please go to AmericanCapitalistParty.org and be a part of the change, man.
Awesome. And my question, Megan, you can't say Sharknado ever again. Okay. So my question is, in honor of the great Mark Pellegrino, is there any chance that the Republican Party can be changed in such a way as to turn it into a vehicle for capitalism? Can the Republican Party be redeemed so that it is a vehicle for promoting capitalism? Please go to YouTube and answer the question. It helps with the algorithm, as Mark likes to say, and it does, and it's great. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You want to subscribe to the channel, and then you're going to get the extra content. We've already got some there. We've got some videos that Mark has done. We've got some videos that I've done, and we've got a lot more coming down the pike. All right, Mark, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time today, Everyday Ethics, 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time today, Crime, Correction, and Culture on this channel, The Rational Alternative on YouTube. It's also going to be streaming on X, on Twitch, and if you miss it live and you want to go get it on Spotify, you can do that too.
All right,
Go ahead,
folks,
Mark.
you got 23 hours until the next Capitalist Corner, so check your premises, man, because we want you coming here fresh, alive, active-minded, okay? Check your premises. Peace.